Hi. In this session, I'm going to let Tom talk about his view of the things that I talked about when I talked about my brother Tom. And those things were the fact that he got polio at a young age, the fact that I got him in innumerable number of fights,
Yeah.
and then at 14 years of age when he got sugar diabetes. So I talked about all that, but I'm going to give you him so he can tell his point of view. So why don't you start out?
Well, the interesting thing is when there was a polio wave going out when I got polio, and it was I was 3.5 years old, so I was born in 47, so that would have been 50, early 51, and a bunch of people had it. Now, the reason people got it at the time is they hadn't developed any cure for it or anything,
Vaccine.
any shot. They
Yeah.
hadn't developed a vaccine. That wasn't developed until 1955. And then they also developed a pill that kept most people, polio's very rare today in the United States. And what happened is my left leg was affected by the polio, and it killed one of the muscles in the left leg, and the doctors did 3 operations on me. And I remember the interesting thing about Dr. Fleming and me and Gary Sarine became good friends. He was in the hospital with me at the same time getting the same operation.
And he lived in Midland, Michigan.
Yeah, he lived in Midland, Michigan. And what the operation I got was called a tendon transplant. They took the dead tendon out, moved another one down from this portion of my leg here, and moved it down to the arch of my foot, supposedly so that I wasn't dragging my foot, because I couldn't pull my foot up at all for all practical purposes. And matter of fact, I can remember Mom speaking to me. She from Highland, our place in Highland, and she stuck her head out the window. It was on the 2nd story, and she said, "Tom, why are you dragging your foot?" And I said, "I'm not dragging my foot." And I remember saying that to her, and I was probably about 4 years old at the time.
Wow.
And anyway, oh, yes, you are. And of course, they had to take me down to Ford Hospital after that, and they checked it all out. And I remember when Mom and Dad were walking down the hall, we had just seen the doctor, and he had got the test results back, and I didn't know what it meant or anything like that. "Oh, the doc thinks it's polio." And I remember Mom started crying, and I said, "Mom, what are you crying about?" And my dad was holding her hand around his shoulder. "It's going to be all right, Mariel," And of course, I didn't. At 3.5 years old, 4 years old, you don't understand any of that. What's going on? What happened was, when I was 5 years old, they did the tendon transplant. They did an operation to take the tendon out of my leg and put it down to my ankle so that I could pull my foot up and walk a lot better, and it worked out. Yes, I could walk a lot better. However, I was the slowest running male in my class, and when you're the slowest running male in your class, especially when you're a kid, that kind of puts you in a situation where if you're out on the playground, people can come and push you and then take off running because they know you can't catch them. Well, that happened often enough. And of course, my brother got into a few fights with people. He'd go pick a fight or two with somebody, and at any rate, to make a long story short, what would happen is, by the time I was 7, they took me in for another operation on the foot, because the foot was pulling in too much this way when I was walking and running, and they cut some tendons over here so that it wouldn't pull in, and that worked out better. And I can remember with my dad, he was instructed by the doctor to do certain exercises of stretching my foot.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about those.
Those things smarted. But I mean, they needed to be done, and Dad did them on a consistent basis. And they were a lot of work, and I'm sure they bothered him, because he must have known that it was smarting a little bit on my part, because at any rate, it worked out so that I could now run better. I was still the slowest male in the class. I think there was one female who could run faster than I could, and all the other ones we could beat. But that's just the way it worked out. That's the way it was. And what would happen is, of course, when you're young and you're male and you're living on a block with a lot of kids, you're probably going to get into a few fights. Now, I'm not suggesting that you have to. If you can avoid them, by all means do. But my mom made it clear, my mom and dad made it clear that if somebody was picking on your brother, that you were to intervene and take care of him, unless they were his age or something like that. But if it was somebody older, and of course he had a habit of going and picking fights with older boys that were my age. So,
only when he was around.
Yeah,
only when he was around.
Yeah, exactly. And he used to pick a fight with Ricky Evans. Now, Ricky was a nice guy. Quite frankly, I knew Dave was picking a lot of fights. Ricky had to defend himself. I would tell him, come on, Ricky, don't pick on him. You're older. And he goes, yeah, well, he's punching me. What do you want me to do? And it's like...
Funny, I don't remember that.
Yeah. Ricky had a cousin, Steve Barnett. Ricky and Steve and us played ball together a lot. We were good friends. Steve is now a policeman down in Dallas, Texas, I believe.
Yes, he is.
He moved down to Dallas, and he got his degree as a police officer up here, and then moved down to Dallas. And
actually, he got his degree in city planning.
Yeah,
but he got out of that.
He got out of that,
into police work.
And then became a policeman, and went down to Dallas and got a decent job down there, I guess. And so, at any rate, during all this time, between 7 and 10, we joined Cub Scouts. I think I was 8 years old when I joined. And Mom became a den mother, which means she had a bunch of kids over to our house that were, anywhere between 8 and 11.
Yeah.
And they were Cub Scouts, and we would work on all kinds of different projects. Mom would help the kids out putting things together, and we got a lot of good friends there that grew up with us in Scouts.
Yep.
Tim Slack.
Robin
Slack wound up dating Steve.
Steve.
Now they didn't
get married. No.
But anyway, I got a final operation on my leg. Now, one of the things that, like I said, this was causing some hassles for me in that I was always the slowest runner in my class, and I was a lousy baseball player. I couldn't hit much of anything, which that was my fault. I finally started. I got the operation when I was 10 years old. I would have been in the 5th grade at the time, and I was telling all the guys in the class, I'm going to be running faster than you are. Well, I never got faster than them, but I at least improved somewhat. I'm doing a lot of bragging for somebody who didn't know what he's talking about. They were going to do a bone fusion thing, and they wound up, instead of doing a bone fusion, putting a metal clamp on 2 bones together to hold them together so that it would do something to the foot to help me move it up more, and I could run faster as a result. And it would give me, took out the limping for all.
Now that's when you had the long cast from the upper thing all the way down to the foot.
I had a long one when I was 5 years old, and also 10 years old.
Okay, I remember that.
When I say it was a long one, they did an operation. They put a cast all the way from my foot all the way up to here.
Yeah.
Now, what they did, not too many weeks after they put that cast on, is they cut it down to size, cut it about right around here, cut the plaster of Paris off, and what you could do is then you had a cast that you could open up and pull your foot out at night and relax it a little bit, put it back in the cast.
I remember that now.
And anyway,
you got a lot of people to sign it too.
Yeah,
signing cast was a big deal back then.
From people in my classes.
Yeah.
At any rate, by the time we got into Cub Scouts, like I said, my mother was the den mother, so that helped out tremendously. Now, Dave got into Cub Scouts 2 years later, and by the time I was 11, I got into the Boy Scouts, and we went on our first camp out. That was fun. It was in January Intense. TENTS. What happened was I had wandered around outside, and snow was melting, and I had gotten my pants all good and wet. And I had rolled out my sleeping bag to go to sleep at night, and the scoutmaster came around to make sure we were all doing pretty well, and he said, "Well, did you get your pants wet?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, you should change them, dry your legs off, and then get a dry pair of jeans on." And I look back now and I wish I had done that, but I said, "Oh no, I'm not going to take these things off. I'll freeze to death." So I went to bed with wet jeans in a sleeping bag. The sleeping bag was nice and warm, as I
You
found
were
out
not,
later,
however.
but I was freezing because of the wet, cold water on my legs. And we were in a tent, and it wasn't in a building or anything like that. Now, later in Boy Scouts, we wound up going to D-Bar A, which had buildings.
Yes,
where they were
yes.
heated during the winter, and
Yes.
they were real nice scout camp, and we learned a lot of things there. And by the time I was 14, I joined Explorer Scouts and made a lot of good friends. Now, at some time in there, I met a guy named Rodney Hurst, who I became good friends with, and he was in my homeroom class, and he got me interested in electronics. We had my Uncle Garfield, who was the public relations officer for Selfridge Air Force Base, got us 2 used jet helmets.
This is great. I don't remember this. This is awesome.
What I remember doing is Rodney said, "We can take them over to Jerry Justman." Now, Jerry Justman was the brother of Sandra Justman, who was in our class. I knew Sandra. And he says, "Well, what can he do?" He says, "He can probably work those earphones so that they'll work and you can hook your radio up to them." Which he did that. He soldered the wires together for the headset. I had this great big, he says,
Wow.
"Are you going to wear this helmet?" I had the great big thing that wasn't a football helmet, it was a jet pilot helmet, and
Yeah.
we painted it bright yellow.
Wow.
To make matters worse, should have painted it white to make it look like an official
Yeah,
jet
yeah,
pilot helmet.
yeah.
Well, we just had yellow paint, and Rodney had yellow spray paint, so we sprayed it. And Jerry fixed the things up so that the earphones worked. Now, they were not high-quality speakers. They were mainly intended for vocal.
Yeah.
They were not intended for music.
Yeah.
But I had a little 6-transistor radio. I had an earphone jack and that he had fixed up for us, and we plugged it in, and I could actually turn up this radio and play it through the speakers. And people said, "What are you doing, man?" And kind of a crazy little thing, but we enjoyed doing it. And
Now,
Rodney,
how did you?
we bummed together through Explorer Scouts, and Rodney later was going with a girl on the block, Barbara Slatovich. You
Yes,
remember that?
I sure
And,
do. Very pretty girl.
Yeah, and Rodney had a lot of girlfriends.
Yeah, he did.
And
But I was going to say, talk a little about the fights I got you in.
Okay.
I mean,
the fights Dave got me in, basically what was happening is usually Dave would go pick a fight with Ricky Evans.
yeah.
Usually.
Or Louis Barbado.
You did pick one with Louis Barbado. Louis Barbado came along, and again, he was one of my friends. He was in my class, and he used to come over to our place, and Dave decided he was going to pick a fight with him. So I think Louis did something to grab the bat or something like that. He was kind of teasing you or something like that. At any rate, we got into a scrap, and people will say, "Well, so-and-so did this or that or the other thing," and I don't know who won it. I don't care. I stood up for Dave because Louis was my age, okay? And Louis was about my height, and but again, Louis had the advantage of he could outrun me in the sense that if he wanted to run away, he could run away. So and I could run, but I couldn't catch him. At any rate, what would happen is you would have things like that going on the playground. That's pretty typical for most schools, and I think the most fights I got into was with Ricky Evans because Dave would pick fights with Ricky. Ricky was 2 years older, and Dave liked to go out and show how he could push Ricky around.
And he lived on our block.
Yeah.
So
4 houses down?
Yeah.
And then we moved over to 87. It was just across the street, and Ricky was a nice enough guy, and it wasn't like
And you later became friends
Yeah.
after you beat him a few times, and he decided, okay, I'm not gonna.
Well, you
know.
said I beat him. I think one time I had a good amount of weight on me, and I think I sat on him is what I did, or got in. Now, but there were a couple of fights where I'm sure that by the time he was 13 or so on,
Yeah.
I'd be doing good to hold my own with him. And Ricky had a younger cousin, Steve Barnett, who was Dave's age.
Oh yeah, we were.
Yeah, Dave,
Steve and I were good.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we're running up against a clock here.
Yeah.
But why don't you talk a little bit about your sugar diabetes?
Well, when I was 14 years old, I was going to Nolan Junior High School at the time, and I was getting. I noticed I was getting real tired, and what was happening was I had gotten sugar diabetes, and the way you usually find up is your sugar goes sky high because your body isn't producing enough insulin to burn the sugar. This is how your body gets energy from the insulin burning the sugar, and those products going to each cell in your body. Now, what would happen is I was at Nolan Junior High, and I was like Dave was saying, I stayed home from school one day because I was feeling not just extremely tired, but I started feeling sick and everything else. And you were feeling like you were very weak and you had no muscles. And what was happening was the high blood sugar was eating away at the muscular structure of my body, and I was getting down low in weight. And they finally took me to the doctor, and they got me into our family doctor, who was Dr. Berndorf, and Mom took me over to Holy Cross Hospital or something like that.
Yeah.
And they took a blood sugar test, and my blood sugar was 800. Well, normal blood sugar is supposed to be at 120, 120 to 140 or so, and mine had gone up to 800. Which the reason it did is because I had got sugar diabetes, and that's usually how you find out it when it goes sky high like that. And they took some blood. They took a blood test, and they got the thing.
And you were in a coma at this point.
Yeah, I actually went into a. I don't know if I went into a coma or. Yeah, I guess
Well,
I did.
yeah.
And what happened is, so they started pumping insulin into me, and they wanted me to start out on. They had a pill, which wasn't insulin, but which was supposed to stimulate your pancreas. Your pancreas is the gland that puts out insulin. And they wanted to use the pill to stimulate the pancreas to put out insulin. The doctor didn't want to have to go to insulin if he didn't have to, because the problem with insulin, it's a balancing act. You've got to make sure your sugar's high enough that you go into a low sugar and you'll go into reaction, and that can be real serious. You could wind up in a hospital from it.
That was really tough, I would imagine, for a 14-year-old, because you're just getting to the point where you're enjoying food.
Yeah, you're enjoying food. I wanted a chocolate candy bar, and then they start, oh, you can't have candy bars. What do you mean I can't have candy bars anymore? You know,
and they didn't have all of
the stuff they do today.
Yeah,
like today I've got an insulin pump on that pumps insulin in, and it's got a little tube right here. The insulin goes through that, and then they've got a little gummed label type of a thing that sticks onto your body, and a little needle that you simply stick into your flesh, and it'll pump the insulin into your blood. So
well, they also didn't have, like now they have specific foods that are made without sugar or with a sugar substitute.
They didn't have any of that stuff back then. At the time at all. That was invented, I think, a year after I became, when I was maybe 15, they came out with Diet Vernors, I think was the first one to come out with soda pop.
Yay, Vernors!
Yeah, yeah, and it was made here in Detroit.
Yeah.
So
you remember when Dad took Mom and Dad and you and I, we went down to the Vernors bottling plant on Woodward Avenue.
Yeah.
But there was something wrong, and we had to wait 45 minutes to get fresh Vernors.
Yeah.
And 45 minutes when you're like 6 years old or 7 years old is like, that's an eternity. But I just remember when we got it, it was like, oh yeah, this is the best stuff there is. Yeah.
And at any rate, I wound up getting the diabetes when I was 14, and when I gave my life to the Lord, I had a lot of friends telling, the Lord can heal you on that. But what I've learned is, yes, the Lord will heal you, but it's going to be in His time. He'll take it out.
Yeah.
And the pastor told me this. He says, what you'll probably do is you'll probably find out you need less and less insulin, and then they'll get to a point where you won't need it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, so.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for. I mean, I'll let you see my thing on that, but thanks for giving us your viewpoint on that. I appreciate it.
It's well, the Lord's going to take care of business. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen.
Amen.